One of the hardest parts of passing your professional engineering exam is the fact that you're probably working a full-time engineering job. So how can you find the time to prepare the way you need to pass the PE exam? Well, in today's episode, I have with me a working professional engineer. Joanna Johnson is a transportation engineer from Parametrix. And Jo is going to share with us not only a couple of key strategies that she used to pass her exam while working full-time, but these same strategies are going to be applicable in many aspects of your career going forward. This Pass the PE Exam video is brought to you by PPI, a leader in engineering exam prep for the FE and PE exams since 1975. PPI provides expert prep courses and study resources designed to help you pass the PE exam the first time. PPI's live online courses include hours of lectures, problem-solving demonstrations, exam strategy sessions, office hours, and a passing guarantee. When you take a live online course, PPI guarantees you will pass, or you can take the on-demand course for free. With study guides, practice exams, and more, the PPI Learning Hub offers digital practice and review that you can take with you anywhere you have a device so that you can prepare during the times most convenient for you. Check out PPI today at ppi2pass.com to see all the options available for PE exam prep. Let's dive in. All right, so Jo, welcome to Pass the PE exam. We're excited to have you here.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you.
So, Jo, to start off, tell our audience a little bit about yourself. What is it that you do? What type of engineering do you do on a daily basis?
Yeah, so I live and work in Washington State, Western Washington. So I do a lot of work throughout the Puget Sound for local agencies, whether that's like counties, cities. Don't really do much state work, but part of my work is mostly in road design, transportation engineering, some site development projects, stormwater utilities, kind of the whole thing.
Yeah, cool. So lots going on with your projects for sure. Lots of different
Yeah.
aspects of your projects. So when it comes to the PE exam, you took the computer-based PE exam while you were working full-time for a consulting
Yes.
firm, Parametrix. So what did your study schedule look like, knowing that you had to work during the day?
Yeah, that was something that was definitely difficult for me to get a grasp on, since I would have my responsibilities during the day, and then at the end of the day, you're like, oh, well, now I want to relax. I don't want to do more engineering. But yeah, my big thing was trying to be consistent, and working with myself and sticking to a schedule. So what I did is I looked at for the CBT exam, you get this nice little reference book. And so I looked at the sections in there and was like, okay, so for this amount of time, I think I need to dedicate to this section of the reference book so I can know these concepts and make sure I'm good with that. And then I kind of did it on like a week by week. So for this week, I want to make sure I'm covering this. And I was able to mesh that into, when some days I have to go into the field. And so for those longer days, I'm like, oh, well, I don't want to study after I come home. So it was kind of having to work with my schedule, taking some time off when I needed to do practice exams. And yeah, that's pretty much was my whole thing about it.
So it was like consistency really, and you had to make sure that you had, I guess, developed, good study habits. And it sounds like,
Mhm.
planning was an important part of it. You looked at the exam, you figured out, hey, this section is going to require more time than this section. So maybe trying to figure out about how many weeks it's going to take. And when you say consistency, would you say that for the most part, obviously sometimes it might change, but were you trying to study at like the same times each day or night, or how did that look specifically, like your timing and stuff?
Yeah, for me, the timing was definitely the same part of the day. Just trying to make sure that I had that momentum and that habit built. Because I guess from remembering back to my college days, I was really successful when I was able to create habits and keep going with those habits. And that was something I had to tap back into after working for like about 4 years. So yeah, habit forming and making sure that I kept up with a schedule was what made me the most successful.
So a lot of our audience is working professionals, of course, that have to, bear down and study for this exam. What would
Mhm.
you say was the most challenging part of studying for an exam like the PE while you were working full time?
Yeah, definitely the most challenging part was just tackling the concepts I've never seen before. I took the transportation PE, and so I mostly worked in more like horizontal design and like the actual like design stuff. I don't do a lot with traffic, and so there's a whole section of like traffic things and traffic modeling that I was like, oh geez, like this is something that's really unfamiliar for me, and just making sure I had to take like some extra time and that like impacted my schedule, and I wanted to make sure that I actually had these concepts down so I could be successful in the exam. That was definitely a challenge for me. I remember getting to that section. I was like, oh no, like this is so much. There's just so much you have to cram into your brain for this exam. But just taking a deep breath, one thing at a time, making sure you know your references that are provided in the exam, all digitally, so you can like search through it. That was what helped me get over that challenge.
So while you were studying for the exam, did you have some goals? I know you said you did some planning, but did you have some specific goals for yourself? And if so, did they help you?
Mm, yeah, I definitely approached it as like milestones.
Hmm.
So I find it hard to like plan like hour by hour, like, oh, I want to do this many hours for this or this many hours for that. So I kind of had more milestones on like, oh, at the end of the week, I want to make sure that I've covered like this kind of topic. Or by the end of the month, I want to make sure that I've gone through at least this many practice exams and this, like, make sure I'm really understanding this kind of practice problem. Um, yeah, so that's something that I really focused on.
That's great. I think that that's a great recipe, not just for the PE exam, but in your career in general, quite frankly, is breaking things down into more kind of achievable tasks that you can handle.
Hmm.
In the world of engineering, there's lots of big, complex projects, and the PE exam or passing the PE exam certainly can
Yeah.
be looked at as one of those. And so, if you're able to break it down and say, "Hey, I need to finish this chapter this week or in the next 2 weeks. I want to do 30 problems this week or whatever the case may be," and you have those small goals and milestones to work for towards. I know for me, like that's a good driver, a good motivator, because you could say, hey, I know I got to get these problems done this week. That's my goal for the week. And I kind of like check off that box type of thing. And it could be very beneficial to keep you on track. And I think one of the other aspects or other really beneficial things in terms of studying for your exam would also be a support system. Did you have a support system, whether it be at work at Parametrix or at home, that maybe helped you in your preparations for the exam?
Yeah, so support system wise, definitely working at Parametrics was um, very, very great. We had my supervisor was really great about even when I started working a few years ago at Parametrics, like always giving me little hints like, oh, this is something that's on your PE exam, and this is something you want to make sure like if you run into this problem in real life, this is something that you might want to make sure you're really understanding before like moving on to a different part of a project. And so I definitely got that mentorship support at work. And it was really great. And we all the junior staff and new PEs at Parametrics, we have our own little support groups where we like, oh, share tips and tricks and how to get through this monster of a test. So
Yeah.
that's something that really helped me, especially since like I don't really know many engineers in like my personal life. It's just mostly at work. So
Yeah.
is getting that support that you need.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. In fact, I think that's one of the areas where a lot of engineers kind of fail to take advantage of, whether you're working for a consulting firm or a public agency or organization, there are probably going to be others there that are preparing for, or, going to have to get ready for the exam at the same time as you. So if you're able to connect with them, if you're able to kind of meet with them on a regular basis, and even the point that Joe made about your supervisor, if your supervisor is a licensed professional engineer, he or she probably has some really good tips that can help you on the exam. And I know maybe they took the written exam and you're taking the computer based, but a lot of preparation tips will still apply regardless of, what type of which of the exams you're preparing for. So I would definitely have a conversation with them and ask them, what helped you? What do you remember as being beneficial in your study habits or efforts or things of that nature? Because a lot of times they just have great advice that they can share with
Mm-hmm.
you, but sometimes you just have to ask them. I mean, they're busy, they may
Yeah.
not be thinking about it. So I think having those conversations can be a game changer.
Mm-hmm.
So Joe, let's talk a little bit about the exam. I don't know how much you remember of it, but do you remember like what you found, what parts of the exam that you maybe found to be more challenging? Like, for example, was it maybe the morning session or the afternoon session?
I know definitely my biggest challenge for the exam was keeping up my stamina throughout the entire exam because it is a long one. You're in this room all day. For I don't know how it is in other parts of the country, but in Washington State, we go to these like testing centers where it's like there's like 15 or so cells that you like sit in and you have like your like sound isolating booth and you're just there in front of a computer for hours and it's just keeping up your stamina, making sure your like body is really in
Mm,
like nourished and like you're ready to like sit in this room and like you have a good lunch that you can take halfway through, you have your water. Just because yeah, it's the first part of the exam of the computer exam was a lot like the FE, so it was more like familiar to me. Then the second half was more of the stuff that I deal with on a daily basis, besides like what I mentioned earlier about the certain traffic stuff that I don't really deal with at work a lot. So there was a lot of there's like a range of familiarity. So being able to like go back and forth between all your different skills in the beginning was difficult. And then in the afternoon session, being able to like dial in on all the different like concepts for the civil exam. So um, yeah, it was quite the day. I remember getting
stamina.
out there.
You need
Yeah, just your
stamina going.
stamina. Like
Yeah.
I got out there and I was exhausted. I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's an important thing to think about because like you said, if you're in most states, it's probably 3 to 4 years at a minimum since you've
Hmm.
graduated from college that you're taking this exam, meaning that you haven't been in that mode of grinding out these kind of problems for this amount of time. Granted, we're still working on, highly complex engineering projects, sure, and doing calculations at work, but it's a little bit of a different flow where you're a lot of interaction with people. I mean,
Hmm.
first of all, you know, I'm glad that you made it clear to everybody that you're not going to a luxury hotel to take this exam. you're probably you're probably sitting in a cell of some sort, in a bare bone desk or something with some maybe a couple papers if you're, a couple things around you if you're lucky. But I think the point of it is though, really, to Joe's point, is getting your body prepped is important. And we have a couple videos on our channel here about this, like what you should eat in the morning, going to
Hmm.
bed, getting good rest the night before, not staying up till 3 in the morning, cramming for the exam. I mean,
Hmm.
listen, this is not an exam that if you didn't study up to the night before, you're in trouble. This isn't like something in college where you can study a couple hours after midnight and, get through it and get an
Hmm.
A on the exam. So really pay attention to your preparation day before, night before, morning before, eating right, sleeping right, staying hydrated. Because that's one thing that sometimes we don't think about with these exams. We think about the problems and the equations and all that stuff, but you physically got to get through it. And if you get
Yeah.
tired, it can really hamper your ability to get the problems right.
I agree with that. And yeah, just also like knowing your references too in the way they're presented on the computer-based exam was a big thing that, especially when I was studying, they had just made the civil transportation exam computer-based. So I was actually one of the first few people to take it. And so just understanding what you're given because that's all you get and being able to work with what you're given in that room. So.
That's great. And again, I think that's another great career lesson, like understanding what's available to you in every situation, right? Like if you're taking the exam CBT, you got to know what's permitted, you got to know what information you have, you got to study with that reference book so you're prepared for that. Same thing happens in engineering, right? You get onto a project. We actually do a lot of project management training for Parametrix, and one of the things we talk about is doing a project management plan at the beginning of your project, understanding what the client's expectations are, understanding what the budget is, right? And then being able to deal with all those I guess you can call them limitations, if you will. A budget is a limitation. You can't exceed it or else your company loses money. Well, if you don't have, if you think you're going to have some information on the exam and you're not, you're going to be at a big disadvantage. So I think understanding that is really important. And Joe, one of the things you mentioned was, just being very regimented in your studying and your preparation. And one of the challenges is kind of like, revving your brain back up to get into some of these complex equations and things that you haven't dealt with. Did you have any tools, or did you use like tools or courses, or were you just doing like self-study for most of your prep time?
Yeah, so that was a big decision factor when I started studying was, okay, what's going to be the most useful? I think it really depends on the person. For me personally, I looked at what the contents of the exam would be. So like in the beginning section, I was like, okay, like I've seen a lot of this before in college. I think I feel comfortable self-studying that. But for the civil afternoon section, which is more focused on like your specific civil discipline, there's a lot of stuff that I just hadn't encountered before. And so I actually went through and did an on-demand like online course where there were videos, and it was really well regimented where the whole course was structured on the PDF like equation booklet that you're given. So we like went section by section through
It's great.
the actual reference. And so that was something that really helped me study because like I could wrap my brain around, okay, well, I'm in this section of the book and I need to reference these engineering references that are provided for me. So yeah, I ended up taking that course and it was really helpful um, for me learning because it targeted what I felt like I was coming into as like a weakness. And I usually do well with like the accountability of having to like show up to
Yeah.
a class, even though it was
Yeah.
online because I was studying during the pandemic. But yeah, that helped me also stay on track because I'm like, okay, I have these different sections that I need to get done each week, and make sure I am understanding that at like a certain point so I can move on to the next thing. Um,
That's great. Yeah, we're big proponents of review courses. I mean, PPI Kaplan's one of our sponsors, so I'll give them a plug. They have good stuff, which I've used. But really, I think any course, get a course, use a course. And I'll tell you a couple of reasons to Joe's point is it's that consistency. You have to show up, you have to go through the course, it's accountability. And especially when you're a working professional and there's a lot of other things you're dealing with, you need something to keep you in line, if you will, and say, hey, I can't miss my course. Or if you have
yeah,
a group you're working within the course, you don't want to let them down, type of thing. And I think it just keeps you consistent, right? Because again, the course is going to kind of do what Joe was talking about earlier. This week we're covering chapter 2, or this month we're covering chapters 2 and 3. So you need to stay on pace with the course, and it's going to keep you going. And so even if you're kind of feeling like, I think I could handle this on my own from a technical perspective, like I know the content, it's just the whole idea of keeping you on pace more than anything else and being able to cover so many topics in a short period of time. And when you say short, I guess that's a question I could throw out to you. I mean, I usually recommend that you should try to budget like, I don't know, 4 to 6 months before your exam of preparation time. I don't know if you remember roughly how long you took to prepare.
I think I did around 4-ish months.
Okay.
But yeah, yeah, I had like a vacation in there. So it wasn't like consistent throughout like the 4 months, but I was like thinking about it and like actually planning. I had a plan for 4 months, I guess is the best way to put that. Because life just keeps happening is also something that
No, for sure.
I realized when studying for this exam. I did have to push it back one time, just because I realized, oh geez, there's just so much happening in life, and you're not a student anymore where you can just put your head down and study.
Yeah, for sure.
So
So Joe, any last pieces of advice for those out there listening? They're working, they have a job and they're trying to study for this exam. Now that you've taken it, you've passed it, any like parting words of advice for someone just trying to get through it?
Yeah, I think definitely for people that are in my situation where you're taking it 4 years after being out of school and like being in the industry, is that you just got to start. Set yourself a goal and you just got to start. And life's going to happen. It's going to feel like there's never going to be a good time to really carve out time, but you just have to make it a commitment and make it a responsibility. And that is the biggest lesson I learned during my time. And if you have to push it back, no shame, keep going towards your goal as long as you end up making it.
No, it's great. It's great advice. I mean, this is a game changer in your career, no doubt, getting your
Hmm.
professional engineering license. So it's worth every bit of the time and effort that you're going to put into it. And I think remembering that and recognizing that is important. And like Joe said, you're always going to be able to come up with an excuse if you want to. And again, I think, Joe, you're giving us a lot of career and life lessons here, not just PE exam, right? I think that happens in your career too. Like you could always
Hmm.
say, hey, I wanted to take this course, but I didn't. I wanted to do this, but I'm busy. I got stuff going on at home. So at the end of the day, it depends how bad you want it. But what I can tell you from working with a lot of engineers, this is a game changer in your career. A lot of engineers that I talk to say, I really regret that I didn't take the time to get my PE license. And now I don't have enough time. I have a family. I have too many things going on. I don't have time to go back and get it. So please consider taking some of the strategies or using some of the strategies that Joe recommended here today. And Joe, I want to thank you so much for taking time again out of your day as a busy engineer and coming on and sharing some tips with our audience.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony, for having me.
I hope you found this video helpful. I really believe that these strategies that Joe shared with us are not only going to help you pass the PE exam, but they're also going to help you progress in your engineering career. Please consider subscribing to our channel here. We put out videos like this on a regular basis to help engineers pass the PE exam. I'll see you next week on Pass the PE Exam.